Hey, great day in the morning, everybody. We're right back on the scene with the Gospel Record Machine. My name is Brother Sam Tate. You're listening to Gospel Gems, where playing the gospel is what I do, and I like my job. By the way, friends, if you happen to be driving around out there today, thank you so very much for letting us ride along with you. After all, it takes people like you to make people like me, and I just want to thank Backstage rubbing shoulders with the stars and all. The disc jockeys, they were characters, but some of the artists that I've had a chance to meet, I used to drive the legendary Otis Redding around, sitting on the dock of the bay. James Brown knew I liked to fly. He'd let me go out and get on his Learjet. Michael Jackson, Jerry Butler, Solomon Burke, all of them. Joe Simon, who was the radio station for the interviews.
I extend a grateful welcome, Brother Sam Tate, who hosted Gospel Gems, America's very first nationally and internationally syndicated Oldie Goldie Black Gospel radio show. Mr. Tate is no stranger to radio studios. He began at the young age of 19 as an announcer for WEAL in Greensboro, while a student at North Carolina A&T University. This was just the beginning of a long career in radio broadcasting. What a time for a young man to meet celebrities, including James Brown, Otis Redding, Michael Jackson, Joe Simon, Jerry Butler, Three Dog Night, Etta Baker, Solomon Burke, Neil Diamond, and many others. Today we are honored to chat with Mr. Tate. Thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thank you, Sister Addie. I'm so excited about being here today.
Wonderful. Let's begin. Godfather of Soul, King of Soul, Mr. Dynamite, the hardest working man in show business, minister of new super heavy funk, soul brother number one, the one and the only James Brown. And you had the distinct privilege of meeting the man. Can we talk some about that?
Yes, we'd be glad. I'd be glad to. As a matter of fact, James Brown, we would help to MC the James Brown shows at the Coliseum. And, we had the opportunity to not only get a chance to MC the shows, but spend some time with him. Now, since like so many celebrities, he became a victim of his own success, and it's sort of sad. Elvis Presley, Michael Jackson, and all, they didn't like to be out in the public, but we did have the opportunity to go backstage, and we'll talk about it a little bit later on, and actually spend some time with the legendary Godfather of Soul.
All right, I like that. See how he sets it up? Now, you know a professional when you hear one. James Brown, in many ways, stood taller than life. Despite his humble beginnings, he carved a 50-year career and was known around the world. Brother Tate, what kind of man does it take to do that kind of thing, in your opinion?
Well, I think it takes a very special type of person, a person with determination. But James Brown had a motto: give out, but don't give up. He ran into, I remember the story before I came to town was told that, for example, he came to perform in Greensboro, North Carolina, but during the days of segregation, he wasn't even permitted to stay in one of the local hotels. So they had to give him a bed in the local YMCA, Sister Addie. Can you imagine that? Other times he came to town, he was passing through Greensboro on the way to a gig somewhere else, and his car broke down. He didn't have the money to actually get the car fixed. So they opened up the El Rocco Supper Club there in Greensboro, and to charge everybody 50 cents to come and see the legendary James Brown. He made enough money. He got his car fixed and went on to the next gig.
Well,
Humble beginnings.
yeah, humble, but you know what? That's a kind of story that you have to be in the scene to know. And so
Right.
that's why, what a privilege for you to share with the world your associations. And that was a interesting time because not only was it segregation, but it was also the opportunity for Black businessmen and women to make their American dream come through uh,
Yes.
by having establishments that you were welcome at.
Yeah, yeah. One other thing I was just thinking, of course, he's from Augusta, Georgia. He started out shining shoes on the steps of the local radio station and later wound up owning that station along with a lot of other radio stations around the country.
I
That's
did,
humble beginnings.
yes, but determination, like you
Yeah.
said. You know, he was bigger than life. What was your first impression of him?
Well, my first impression, unlike Otis Redding, who was the nicest guy in the world, James Brown was a cocky little guy. For some reason, he was always nice with me, but he was strictly business. He didn't play. I remember one night he took care of business and he wanted you to do it right. He was on stage performing out there behind the mic. I was around behind the stage, and his little drummer just had a bad night that night, Sister Addie. So James walked away from the microphone and all of his dancing and all, came back there and told the little brother, listen, you no longer work for me. He fired him right there on the spot. Of course, he would run through about 3 drummers per show, but he was strictly business. And I'll tell you a little bit later on about some other things I remember about him being strictly business.
Well, you know what? That is why, another reason why he became James Brown and all those accolades that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Uh, James Brown, the man. How did people act around him?
Well, like so many artists who are high up, he was very protected by his bodyguards and all. I remember one time, just to show you, talking about becoming a victim of your own success, I was downtown on the square in Greensboro, North Carolina, and I heard tires squalling, and apparently James Brown was walking down the street and dressed about like a pauper, shade glasses on and everything. But 2 or 3 ladies recognized him, and they took out after him. Sister Addie, he ran right out in front of a car. It's a wonder the car didn't hit him. But I also remember, at the end of every show, he would say, "Well, good night, everybody." And when he would say good night, here the crowd would come toward the stage. And I remember this particular night, his driver brought his limo around behind stage and left the door open. He jumped off of that stage, jumped in that car so quick, and Sister Addie hit his head upside of the door. I can feel it to this day. It had to hurt. But I say all that to say, that is why many artists like that have to stay very private, because they would rip his clothes off and everything.
That was one of the questions I was going to ask, if he was approachable. So you have answered that for me. Out of
Yes,
necessity, out of his own safety.
yes, yes.
Wow. But he was a personable person, right? If he
Yes, he was
got
he was he was very personable, but he was strictly business. Strictly business now.
mm,
Uh, uh, yeah.
I'm going to ask you about that business aspect. James Brown recorded and released 17 singles that reached #1 on the Billboard R&B charts. He also holds the record for the most singles listed on the Billboard Hot 100 chart that did not reach #1. Tell us about the energy around playing his music at the radio station and who decided what was going to be played.
Well, that's a good question, Sister Addie. Ordinarily, back during those days, we had so much product what would come in, so many CDs and all that would come in every day to the station that I hate to admit it that the disc jockeys, they were lazy, but we would look for labels. We would look for Motown. If it was a Motown sound, we'd put it over there, and or James Brown. If it was James Brown, we would always put his in stack number one. But it wasn't we really threw away and discarded, I guess, hundreds of projects, but when it was James Brown, Say It Loud and I'm Proud, or whatever, that's what we played.
All right.
Yeah.
And what were some of the songs that you remember dominating the airways?
Well, his signature song, I guess, was Please, 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 Please. When he would go off stage, he would start off stage and they would throw the, the whatever over his shoulders, and he would throw it off and get up again and start over. Please, please, say it loud and I'm proud. I had been an old pilot for many years, a commercial pilot with instrument multi-engine rating and all, and a former flight instructor there for a while. And he knew I would like to fly. I like to fly, and he let me go out to his Learjet. But the thing is that stood out in my mind, I would go out to his Learjet and get on it. But I know that's back during the years of Say It Loud and I'm Proud. I noticed James Brown didn't have any Soul Brother pilots. I said, something's wrong with this picture, But I guess it wasn't that many black pilots anyway, but I thought that was pretty interesting. Speaking of his plane, since we're talking about it, I thought it was very interesting. All of the seats, Sister Addie, in his baby Learjet was taking out, except the ones right behind the pilots and the ones all the way in the back, the very back. On the floor in the middle was nothing but suits of clothes. Like I say, he would always change at least 3 times during the show, and that stood out in my mind. No seats in the plane hardly, just enough for him and maybe 1 or 2 other people and the pilots.
He purchased that Learjet 23 in 1966, and I understand that he was the first Black American to own a private jet.
As far as I know, yes, and that was quite an accomplishment. Coming from humble beginnings like he did, to visit the president of the United States and own his own Learjet, the baby Lear. I always wanted one too. It had James Brown, his name across the tail of the airplane. Can you imagine that?
Well, I would expect nothing less. Now,
Yeah.
you got to, as you've shared, got to walk around. How did you get invited to see the plane inside?
Well, that's a good question. Like I said, I was always interested in learning how and becoming a pilot. But at the end of the show, I would go up and I'd say, James, would you mind if I went out to see your Learjet? And he would sort of smile, like he was sort of amazed, a bit shocked. Here this young black man, 19, 20 years old, wanting to go see his airplane. The other disc jockeys were wanting to be stars, but I wanted to go out and see his Learjet. So he would sort of smile and say, go on out,
So you went by yourself?
Well, yes, I went by myself because nobody else wanted to go with me. But that was okay. I knew about where the plane was parked out at the base operators there, and went out there and went up to the pilot and say, listen, Mr. Brown said I could come out and check out his Learjet. They said, go on, take a look at it,
Well, that is really nice. Yes, Mr. James Brown was undoubtedly a businessman. Besides being commander of the music and the studio, I understand that he wanted to manage himself and butted heads with his professional promoters and agents. This was unheard of in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. But it was the kind of man that James Brown insisted upon being, that I will not be controlled. Tell me about that man.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, he started his own label, and I can't even remember the name of it right now, but he started his own label. And because at the time, a lot of the other promoters and people who owned the label were making all the money. But James realized he could make all 100% of the money, and he did by starting his own label. He wound up owning a chain of radio stations, but I understand he got in trouble with the FCC with a lot of them because of bad management. The managers that he would hire knew that James Brown wasn't around to ride herd on them, so they did a few things that were illegal, like they call it double billing and all that. And this, from what I understand, you know. But yeah, but he, like I said a few moments ago, he was used to shine shoes on the radio station steps there in Augusta, Georgia. He wound up owning that station.
Absolutely. One of the things that I am aware of is James Brown did admire young Samuel Tate. You have shared that he gave you some life advice. Let's talk about what he shared with you.
Well, I'm glad you asked that, Sister Addie, because that's a question that's very dear to my heart. I wound up later on getting the license from the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, building and operating my own radio station in the mountains of North Carolina, in an area, a little area called Boone and Blowing Rock and all. Anyway, James Brown is the one that inspired me to go into ownership of my own station. And let me explain what happened. I don't know. Do you know what payola is?
I've heard of that.
Payola. Okay, to make a long story short, I'm the little jock on the air, right? And you come into my studio with your project, your CD or whatever in hand, and slide $100 under the table. You see, it was very illegal, but it happened. But the statute of limitation protects me today. But anyway, the average Otis Redding of the world would come slide something under the table, and I didn't care if they had a piece of junk. I'd put it on the air, and if I couldn't stand the way it sounded, I would turn the monitor down and still play it on the air. And the reason payola is so illegal is music is like food, it's psychological. How many times you've heard a song today, you hated it, 3 weeks later, you found yourself going to the record store or whatever, buying the song? Well, it got in your subliminal because the disc jockeys played it over and over and over again. Well, James Brown was classy. Before he had his business manager take care of the disc jockeys that night, after the James Brown shows at the Coliseum, you had to go into James Brown's dressing room about 2:00 in the morning and listen to this pep talk by James Brown. And I never will forget, Sister Addie, he said, "You older cats need to stop acting a damn clown behind the microphone and go into ownership and management and stuff like that." I could tell those older dudes, man, they were, it just went right over their head. Come on, man, it's 2:30 in the morning. Give me my bread so I can go home, But to answer your question, Sister Addie, I never forgot that. Go into ownership. Because he said, tonight, I'm worth $10 million, but I'm a miracle. You don't find situations like me every day. Try to inspire the guys and the ladies to go into ownership. But I don't know. I don't think too many of them did that. They were more interested in being a star,
That reveals a side of him that many people may not recognize, that he was for the people.
Yeah, a mentor.
A mentor, and he cared about blacks in business. He invested in education. He was a man who wanted to correct some of the societal ills that he was caught up in.
Yes.
So it's always good when you hear about the star to also understand the man.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right. That's exactly right. But I always wanted to I never really got the chance to thank him for inspiring me. And he and I won an award. He won an award at a program in Atlanta, and Gospel Gym, my syndicated, national syndicated radio show, receiving an award. And he was supposed to be there to accept the award, but for some reason he couldn't make it. So his daughter was there. But that was the night I was going to personally thank him once again, for inspiring me to go into ownership.
Well, I thank you for sharing your stories, your knowledge that allows people to have another level of understanding and appreciation for the man. And maybe that's why you are the great Mr. Samuel.
I don't know about that, but I appreciate the compliment.
Absolutely.
Next time, talk about was how the old black comedian Pigmeat Markham taught me how to take a disadvantage and turn it into advantage. Footage at 11, ladies and gentlemen. We'll tell you about that the next compliment.
A remarkable man with stories to tell. In our next conversation with Brother Sam Tate, we'll talk about Durham's own Pigmeat Markham and Mr. Joe Simon.